Hello cellists. This is a bonus lesson to see if I can explain a little bit about the theory that I have touched on in some of the lessons so far. Principally I've talked about the relationship between the tonic note G, which is our key of the suite, and the dominant D major. Now this actually all relates to the circle of fifths, and so I thought I would actually give you a very brief run through of the circle of fifths and why it's useful and quite important to us. So at the top of the circle of fifths I've put C, which has got nothing in it in terms of sharps or flats. It's an empty key signature. And if we move from the C up a fifth, so we go up to C, D, E, F, G, you arrive at a G, and that is the next note along in the circle of fifths. Now when you might be thinking, why is that? Really the detail is better covered by looking at publications. I probably won't cover too much on the detail right now. If you want a recommendation, then I would recommend this book by Eric Taylor. It gives plenty of detail. You can have a look at page 21 on there. Basically, in order to create a major scale structure, which is 2 tones, semitone, 3 tones and a semitone, you could take any note. If we took G, which is our key, in order to create that structure we would have to raise the F to an F sharp, and so we've added 1 sharp in here. If you take the same principle, in actual fact you can start with any letter you like and take that principle, and ultimately they come into the sorting office, if you like, and they'll fit in our circle. So we can move along and see if this is true for the next stage up. Going up from a G, a fifth above, of course we've got G, A, B, C, D, we come to a D, and then a fifth above that is an A. Now as you can see, these first 4 major keys that I've put on this quarter of the circle are very familiar to us. It's what we tune our cello to, A, D, G, C. So quite easy for us to very quickly get to grips with this relationship of fifths on this quarter of the circle of fifths. Now, in terms of trying to find the fifths, thinking about your cello the other way round, if you imagine second finger on the A string in first position playing a C natural, and you jump across the string to the D, your second finger is now on an F. So that's a fifth below. That must be on this side of my circle of fifths if I'm going to go down this way. If I jumped across again, second finger on my G string, I would find a B flat, and again to the C string, and E flat. And at this point we've now covered half of the circle of fifths. And that in terms of what is telling us for our key signatures, here we have 1 sharp for the G, we have 2 for the D, 3 for the A. On this side, 1 flat for F, 2 flats for B flat, and 3 flats for E flat. So it's a bit like a clock really. If you take this as position 0, 0, 1, 2, 3 sharps, 4, 5 and 6 will be here. On this side, 1, 2, 3 flats, 4, 5 and 6 are here. Now I'll quickly fill in the rest of these. So here we have an E, a B, an F sharp at the bottom. This side we have an A flat, a D flat, and we have G flat or F sharp. They are called enharmonic equivalents. And that means you can have 6 sharps or 6 flats. They'll sound the same. That could be debatable, but basically they are. And the rest of these just tell us how many flats we've got. There are 5 flats in D flat major. There are 3 sharps in A major, for an example, looking around the clock. Now bear with me, we've nearly got everything we need to really help us understand the relationships in the suite that we're looking at. I'm just going to touch on the relative minors. Now in terms of the technicalities of how they're made up and their structures for melodic, harmonic or natural minors, again refer to Eric Taylor or another authority for theory. But if you even looked in your scale book and looked for the key signatures in there, you'll see that A minor, like C major, has got nothing in it. So the natural minor, A minor, has got no flats or sharps, and we will add in a raised seventh for the harmonic minor, that's a G sharp. And if we were playing a melodic minor, as you'll probably know, we would raise the sixth and seventh on the way up, and we would flatten them, make them natural on the way down. So in terms of filling in the rest here, you might now actually have a shortcut. A shortcut could be, because we can see the relationship between these letters, going backwards on the alphabet, C, B, A, we've come to the A. So you could do the same on any of these, that you can go backwards by 3 letters and you would find the relative minor. You might also see the ones I have just filled in here are again familiar letters to us, A, D, G and C. They are of course a fifth apart, and we've seen them here on the major portion of this circle. The outside capital letters are being major, the inside lowercase letters are being minor. So this quarter of the circle represents the same relationship as these. So that's another way to get a shortcut. Basically the whole of this clock is turned by a quarter, and then you can fairly easily fill in the middle letters. So here we had a C, we would come to F, B flat, E flat down the bottom. Coming this way we had an A here, so the next letter along is an E, and then a B, and then an F sharp. Now at this point we have to do a little bit of switching over for the enharmonic nature, because we're looking at sharps on this side and flats on that. So here, rather than putting in D flat, that makes no sense on the sharp side, so we put the enharmonic equivalent of C sharp. And similarly here, rather than A flat, we would be putting in a G sharp. And similarly here, we can have E flat minor or D sharp minor. Right, that's probably quite enough of the construction of the circle of fifths. Now let's have a perhaps more useful observation about the area that we're really interested in. Here's G major, our key of the suite, and there's the fifth above, D major, the dominant. It's known as the dominant because it's so strong, and that the dominant chord holds the leading note in it, which is in this case the F sharp, and that leads and rises and pulls us up to the G, which we have seen many times in the suite so far, and you'll see more of in the weeks to come. Within the suites, the main relationship is between those two keys, the G major and D major, so that basically in every single movement we are moving to the dominant or to the dominant minor in one case. We also are looking at the relative minor. Hopping across into the inside of the circle, we see E minor as a relative minor, and in fact every single movement except for the second minuet also modulate or pass through E minor. And one of the indicators of that is to find a D sharp, which is the leading note in E minor. The movement I mentioned that doesn't use it is the second minuet. That's worth a moment to think about, because the key of that movement, unlike all of the other movements which are in G major, the key of the second minuet that we covered last week is in G minor, over here. And within that particular movement, we actually do pass through F and B flat. We arrive at B flat, which is the relative major of G minor. Now, you might also see that we're passing through C, F and B flat are the chords that he moves through to arrive here at the G minor area, the B flat major area. And I have been presenting this week F major as one of these scales. I mean, in part because it fits in with the Foyard's 29th study that we're looking at, but also it's a subdominant of the key we're looking in relationship. Now, let's just think about that for a minute. This circle of fifths really shows us dominant movement here. The D is the dominant of G, the A is the dominant of D, because they're a fifth above all the time. And of course G would be the dominant of C. But let's think, if you were rising up to a C, G, A, B, C, it's actually fourth above G, and that's now known as the subdominant when it sits above the tonic like that. So don't worry if you don't get this, but basically if that's our keynote, this part of the circle in this instance is actually describing subdominant relationships, and this side is describing dominant relationships. So in the Bach suites, there's a great deal of the use of the A chord, or A7, which is the dominant of the key of G. There is also, as we've discovered, some movement to B flat major, and there is quite a few passing places on the way to the subdominant of C. So if we're looking at this as a subdominant relationship, C is the subdominant of G, F is the subdominant of C, B flat would be the subdominant of F. So when I was looking this week at F major, it is the subdominant of our key, the tonic G. I hope that wasn't too confusing. Rewind, have another think about it, and do have a look up at Eric Taylor's books about theory.